welcome to my channel. I'm Rebecca. I'm an animal communicator and spiritual medium. Today I want to talk to you about wasps. It's that time of year, particularly where I am in the UK, that wasps are everywhere, and it can make outside dining a little bit annoying. I do appreciate that some people do have allergies to wasp and bee stings, so for them the fear is very genuine. But also we have, and I've spoken about this before in my Instagram posts about fear, sometimes fears come from, they're passed down to us. So if we have family members that are afraid of certain things, we can then take that fear on, and we grow up learning to be afraid despite not having a direct experience with the thing we're afraid of. But also sometimes fear can come from an experience that we might have had. And growing up, I actually, one time I sat on a wasp. I didn't see it. It was completely my fault. It was on a picnic blanket, and I sat down and I got stung at the top of my thigh, and it was incredibly painful. And that experience kind of made me afraid of wasps. I also remember my father drinking out of a can in the garden, and he'd put it down beside him for a while, and when he picked it up and he drank out of it, a wasp was in it and he got stung on the lip. So they were kind of two things that I remember very vividly from being quite young that made me afraid of wasps. And in all this time, since those incidents, I've never been stung by a wasp again. But the reason that I want to talk about it today is because I spend a lot of time in nature, as you know, especially with the work that I do. I spend a lot of time in my garden. I love gardening. And I'm always very aware of the changing seasons. I love to see the way that things change in nature, and I'm very, very aware. So I always kind of know, I'd been thinking, it's going to be a kind of wasp season again. Wasps are going to be coming around soon. And we have, and our neighbours have a beautiful, huge yew tree in their garden, which this time of year has lots of lovely beneficial berries on it for birds, for insects. And the wasps absolutely love it. So we get a lot of wasps coming in our garden around this time of year as well. And the only concern I ever have is if my dog is in the garden with me. She loves to lay out in the garden, just to make sure that, because sometimes if a wasp or a bee will kind of fly near to her face, she might give a little air snap. But she's generally very good. And so I'm just really aware of the wasps, not so much for myself, but mostly for her if she's out in the garden with me. So I'd been aware that, wasp time was coming, and I was sat in the garden and I was doing some work, and a wasp kind of flew near me, and I immediately felt myself tense up, which is ridiculous to me, because I know some people believe that wasps will kind of come out of nowhere and sting you. And I caught myself in that moment of having that feeling of tensing up and almost waiting for it to sting me. And then I was thinking, don't be so silly. In the work I do, I'm blessed that I can have this conversation. I can feel the energy. I can ask, what are your intentions? Are you going to sting me? And so I opened up this dialogue with the wasp, and it came and it landed on me, and I was fascinated watching it. But I also felt incredibly sad, because the wasp said, why do people hate us? They love the bees and they demonize us. And it made me feel really sad, because in that moment I was thinking, well, actually, yes, it is ridiculous, isn't it? We've learned as a society that wasps are to be feared, and that they're an annoyance. And aside from working on a spiritual level, I don't know a great deal about wasps. I know there's lots of different types of wasps, but I don't know a great deal about them. So I was trying to kind of learn a bit more about them on this spiritual energy level, communicating with the wasp and trying to understand it, just as you would if you met somebody new. You want to get to know them, you want to ask them, what do they like, what do they do for a job, all of those kind of things. And this is the conversation that I was having with the wasp. So it had kind of come into my energy field and landed on me, and it knew that I was tense and I didn't really want it there. And it had said this thing to me about, why do people love the bees and yet they demonize us? We're trying to live our lives as well, and we are beneficial to you. And it made me feel quite sad. So I've been learning a lot over several years that with Wasp, we grew up sitting outside a lot. In the summertime, we would sit outside a lot for our meals, and it was lovely. And I've learned over the years that if you just leave them, they will do their thing, they will visit, they will come to see what you're doing, what you're eating. They may wish to feed upon what you're eating, and then they will go away. And before I had this encounter, I'd met up with a friend. I met up with a friend for lunch, and we'd said, "Oh, well, it was really nice. We'll sit outside. We'll have a drink outside, and then we'll see what the situation is. If there's lots of flies and wasps, and we might go in for food." But what I didn't know, and I've known my friend for a really long time, was that my friend is absolutely terrified of wasps, and again, not for any reason. And so this wasp came around, and my friend starts frantically like waving their arms and flicking it away, and it just keeps coming back. And I was like, if you just leave it alone, it will come see, it will have a look around, and then it will leave. And my friend was trying this for a bit, but I could see, it's almost like when you say to someone, and I do it a lot, I hadn't realised until I started recording these videos how much I talk with my hands, but it would be like saying to someone, don't talk with your hands, sit on your hands, and you can feel the energy of, oh, I can't do it. And I could feel that my friend was trying really hard to not wave around and flick the wasps away, but it just got the better of them. And so I'd had this moment where I just thought to myself, oh, it's such a shame, that everyone can't realise that if we just observe them and we leave them, they will go about their business and then they will go on their way. And so then a couple of days later, I'd gone to this moment where I was in the garden and one landed on me, and I started having this dialogue with the wasp. And I actually found out something really, really interesting. Now, I always talk about, how everything is energy, we're all connected. And animals especially, like with our animal companions that share a home with us, they pick up on our energy. All animals have this ability to feel our energy. But wasps, for some reason, wasps are super highly attuned. And I also think that part of the reason that they're super highly attuned to human energy is as a survival mechanism. It's something they've developed. So the wasps are saying, yes, that's exactly it. So it's a survival mechanism that they've developed. They've enhanced their connection and the ability to feel our energy because it protects them, because they can get swatted away, they can get squashed. So if you could imagine a human being with like the ripples of energy, like almost like sound waves that you could see, or when it's really hot and you can see the heat coming off the road and it gives that like the rippling, looks like the atmosphere is rippling. That is what the wasps were showing me. They see around us, they actually see our energetic field and they feel it, almost like radio waves and static. They can feel it. And what they showed me was they're actually, because they're very sensitive, they're also actually quite nervous. And that was another thing that I hadn't really considered, because you think of wasps as, if you've been stung by one, you'll know their stings are very painful. And unlike bees, wasps can sting multiple times. They won't just sting and then, go off. Their stingers don't come out of them. So you wouldn't really think, knowing that about them, you wouldn't think that they are nervous creatures, but they are incredibly nervous. And the word that they gave me was flighty. We're quite flighty. So when they come into our space and our energy field, and we're calm, like I was when, I was just watching this wasp and it landed on me, their energy calms down as well. Whereas when we are in the same space as them and we are panicked, we're going to get stung, and we start flicking our arms around and waving them away, they get panicked with, oh no, what's going to happen to me? What's going on? And so then they switch on this. It's not even like attack mode because it's just preservation. So they panic. And it took me back to the time I mentioned earlier about when I sat on a wasp. Obviously, it wasn't the wasp's fault. The wasp was just taking a rest on my picnic blanket. And it didn't even sting me it didn't sting me on purpose. So it was, I was going to say it didn't sting me intelligently. That's interesting. It didn't mean to sting me. It wasn't thinking about stinging me. I'd sat on it, and I believe probably what happened was as I squashed its abdomen, its stinger probably came up into my skin. But they don't go into an attack mode where they're like, I'm going to get you. They're literally picking up on our energy. We're panicking. They're panicking. It's almost like, you know, that mass hysteria that people get when they're in a situation and one person panics and it ripples through everybody. They're picking up on that and they're panicking. And because they're so much smaller than us, they don't know what's coming next. Are we going to squash them? Are we going to hurt them? So for them, it's a case of, you know, oh, I have to protect myself. And understanding this just gave me such a different perspective on how, not only how they show up in the world, but also how they view us. And I always had this feeling that wasps were beneficial because they're always going into the flowers, but I didn't know if they were pollinators or not. And so I looked up some information on them today, which I just want to read to you. And it's beautiful and it's so interesting. So it says here that wasps are part of the Hymenoptera order, which contains the primary pollinators of the world, including bees. Wasps are often not recognised as beneficial. They play a key role in pollination as well as in the control of harmful or invasive insects. Most wasp species are either solitary or parasitic, but there are also at least 850 social wasp species that live in colonies and create hives. Compared to bees, wasps are less efficient at pollinating, but they are still able to pollinate and feed off of nectar as bees do. And so I was just absolutely blown away by this because they are very similar to bees. And bees, because bees have these lovely fluffy bodies, bees are able to collect more pollen than wasps. Wasps are quite streamlined and smooth. However, what I was finding out was wasps can actually reach some places that bees can't reach. And one of the things that I didn't know was, where did I see it? It said here something about, yes, so some studies have shown that in circumstances, wasps are more efficient than bees. They are specific pollinating roles for wasps, such as pollinating orchids and figs, which I didn't know. So fig trees and beautiful orchids that many people love wouldn't be possible if we didn't have wasps. And so wasps are quite different to bees. So wasps will feed on nectar, but they are omnivores. So they will eat insects, they'll have nectar, they'll eat invertebrates. They also prey on other insects to feed to their larvae, but they are a huge kind of gardener in their own world of also keeping down the populations of invasive insects. And so that's super interesting as well. So it's just very odd to me that we've really overlooked these beautiful creatures because of our fear of them, and understanding for me that they can be just as afraid of us as we are of them is quite sad. But also it helps to think, well, actually, you know, it's a bit the same with spiders, isn't it? We're so much bigger than them, yet we can be so terribly afraid of them. And yet we actually don't need to be. These are beneficial creatures. Everything has a role to play upon the earth. And if we can just give a little bit of understanding in the way that they work and the way that they feel, we can live in harmony alongside them. And I've always said, like, this is my calling. The fact that I have this beautiful ability to be able to communicate with animals and the natural world. I feel that my mission is to share this information so that people gain a better understanding, and so that we can work to living in harmony with animals that are misunderstood, and just realizing how, as we always say, that everything works together, everything is connected, and it's really beautiful. And I saw a moment of this. I can't remember if it was on the same day or it may have been a day or two later. So if you follow me over on Instagram, you will see that I had caterpillars, cabbage white butterfly caterpillars that came into my polytunnel, and I've been growing radishes, and they were having an absolute whale of a time on the radish leaves. And initially I thought, oh no, you're going to eat all the radishes. And then I was shown they're only eating the leaves, and they're not eating them at such a fast rate. It's going to impact the radishes growing. So I was like, well, that's fine, because I want the radishes and they want the leaves. So again, it was a beautiful moment of harmony for me where, that didn't matter. So I left them to it, and one of them had hatched out and climbed onto my finger, and I'd made a post about that. And there were several, and it seemed like every day I went, there would be more and more of these caterpillars. And it was really lovely to watch. And I remember as a child, we actually had caterpillars. We kept them out in the garden in an area where we could watch them change from caterpillars into butterflies. And so it brought back that lovely moment of being childlike again, and remembering that lovely memory from growing up. And so after having this connection with the wasp, I saw a wasp had flown into the polytunnel as well. And the wasp was walking along the leaves, just going about its business, and I was sat watching, and I was thinking, oh, that's interesting. He's obviously looking for some food. And there was a caterpillar on one of the leaves, and these aren't parasitic wasps. There's a caterpillar on one of the leaves, and he's crawling along, and he's looking around, and suddenly he comes across this caterpillar, and immediately his energy was like, what's this? And before I could do anything, it nipped the caterpillar on the back with its pincers, or like its mouth parts, not sure what they're called, its little mouth parts. And I felt quite sad, because the caterpillar flinched, and I could see obviously it had hurt. And then the wasp quickly scurried over the caterpillar and flew away. And that whole interaction just showed me exactly what the wasp had been talking to me about how flighty they are, and they get quite nervous, and they don't intend to hurt. And I wasn't really sure what to do with the caterpillar, because I could see that it was it was injured, but it was still eating, and it was still walking along. And my guides just said, nature will take care of it. So I just left it. And sadly, in a couple of days, when I did come back and I had a look, it had obviously, I think, I don't know, like, you would, if it was a human, you would say they bled out. It was quite sad. But there was just this little shriveled dead body of the caterpillar, and so it had passed away, sadly. But that whole episode had kind of really shown me that actually, the wasp hadn't gone looking to harm the caterpillar. It had literally suddenly, it would be like somebody jumping out of the shadows at you and frightening you. How would you react? It was an instant reaction. And so I was understanding more and more about this flighty nature that the wasps had said to me. So I know there are parasitic wasps, and parasitic wasps will lay their eggs in a host, which will then, the larvae will then grow, and they will hatch, and they will then eat the host, which I've always found a little bit sinister, because it's a bit like creating zombie things. But again, as I said, wasps actually play a real beneficial role in balancing the population of certain insects. And so everything just flows, everything is just flowing, and wasps really aren't to be feared. Now, the reason that wasps will come down for our food and things, they have an amazing sense. Like I said to you, they're very attuned to our energy. they also have amazing sense of like their receptors for sweet things. So when we're outside eating, or particularly when we're drinking, you will notice if you go somewhere, especially when alcohol is being served, they will come down and they will land on the glasses. And anything that is sweet and sticky, they're taking the sugar. So they're trying to feed themselves, so they're not coming down to be annoying to you. And I know some people might think, gross, insects on your food and things like that. I've never felt that way about them. I don't feel that way about them. They're not the same as flies, that flies will land on feces. Wasps aren't that way. So it's the same for me. If a wasp lands on my food, it's the same as if a bee landed on it. It doesn't bother me. I appreciate that some people might feel differently about that, but to me, it doesn't bother me. And I remember watching one time, I was having lunch with my mum, and she'd had like it was like a cold salad. We'd have like sliced ham, and I remember this wasp landing on her plate, and we watched it in absolute amazement. Again, this is when I was very young. We watched in absolute amazement as it sawed off a tiny little piece of meat and carried it away. They are such fascinating creatures, and again, they're living in a tiny world. We're living in this big world. They're living in a tiny world, and sometimes our worlds collide. And it's just really understanding that they're not out to get us. They are just trying to seek, like with the sweet things, they're trying to seek the sugar, the nectar. And also they're interested. They're very interested. Like we would be, you walk past somebody's garden and you kind of have a look at what they're growing in their garden. They're the same. All animals are like that. They're interested in us. And it's very sad to me that rather than being interested in them at a deeper level, we're very quick to label them as pests, or to be afraid of them, or to dismiss them, or to not even pay them any attention. I think that's incredibly sad. So again, part of my work is raising awareness to hopefully forge that connection, so that we do understand these animals and creatures and nature on a deeper level, and so that we realize we don't have to be afraid. We have to live in harmony and respect, but no animal is ever out to get us. I think that's something that is a very human thing, and I'm sure I've spoken about it before. We are the only species that kill for the sake of killing. Let that sink in. We're always terribly afraid of everything else, and being bitten or eaten, or all of these things. But anything in nature is only going to attack, A, when it feels threatened, B, if it's hunting and it needs food, or C, if it is protecting its young. So again, if it feels threatened, we're in its space and we shouldn't be. Everything is able to work in harmony if we have a bit more understanding and we actually respect them. It's the same with, you'll hear stories about bears mauling people. If you actually look into that, it's probably because they had their young with them, or the people approached them, or the people startled them, or they had food where they shouldn't have had food. There's always a causation. We can always find out these things. And it is just about learning to understand them, and a willingness to learn and understand as well. Because they desperately want to understand us. They don't want to harm us. They want to understand us. And just going back to what the bee said to me at the start of our conversation about, why are they demonized, and they feel quite sad about that. That really made me sad, because, it would be like you going into a new workplace and you're instantly hated by everyone, and no one helps you. Nobody shows you how to do your new job. Nobody talks to you. You sit and have lunch on your own. Imagine how you would feel. You'd be thinking, but why? Like, I've literally just come here. I don't know you. I haven't done anything wrong. It would be horrible. So let's think about that in the way that we treat, other aspects of nature and the animal kingdom. So wasps are very interesting. There's so many different varieties of them. I was actually in the forest the other week and I saw some amazing, I believe they are wood wasps, and they were absolutely huge. And I was so fascinated to watch them, and they were actually feeding from the sap on the bark of a tree. So when we are around them, I think when we're sitting, I'm just having this energetic conversation now with the Wasp community of how they would like us to interact. And so when we are sitting, or we're outside, we're effectively in their domain, we're out in nature. So when they come around us, they just want to have a look. And they're saying, if you've got something tasty to eat or drink, we might like to sample it and to share it with you, if that would be okay. Yeah, when we're walking around, quite often if we're in movement, they generally will fly past us. They're not going to come and land on us or anything like that. Occasionally they might, and they're saying sometimes we get tired like bees. They might land on you and be tired. Um but yeah, they're just saying, observe us, interact with us. And yeah, they're reminding me. I've even had the conversation before I kind of deep dived into a conversation with them. I'll say, if I have my patio doors open and I see one making its way in, I'll just say, come on, you've come into my house. This isn't where you belong. Can you go back out, please? And they will always leave. Um, when we start chasing them around and trying to get them, they're panicking. They're in an environment that they're not normally used to, and they're not, is not natural to them. So they're thinking, oh my goodness, what am I doing in here? What's going to happen? How do I get out? We make the situation worse. Whereas if we open the doors, we open the windows, and we say to them, you're not supposed to be in here. Could you please leave? They will go. They don't want to annoy us. We have to stop putting the way that humans act towards each other onto the animal kingdom, because they don't behave in the same way. They're a lot more accommodating than we are. So yeah, just observe them. If you're very afraid of them, or if you are allergic to them, if one does happen to come near you, and I know it's incredibly hard to fight that reaction of, and again, we're reacting that way. It's the fight or flight response. It's very hard to fight that, and I understand that. But if you are able to, if they come near you, if they land on you, just say to them, "I'm afraid of you," and or I'm allergic to your stings, and I am afraid. Would you please leave? Um, they're saying they'll work with us to do better. They'll work with us to do better. They don't want to have us living in fear. They also, as I said, they don't want to sting us. They're not flying around looking for you as a target. That's not how they are. It's always this miscommunication and this frantic energy that causes them to panic. And one thing that I shared on my Instagram stories the other day, I've spoken about before, creating, when it's very warm, creating a water bath for birds, for insects, and the importance of putting rocks or stones in so that the smaller insects such as bees and wasps and even ladybirds can go down on a stone to the water level, and they can drink safely without drowning. And I was doing some gardening in this spot, and I know it absolutely wasn't by chance that this occurred as I was in this same area to see it, because otherwise the wasp would have drowned and I wouldn't have seen it. This wasp is not on, and there's at least 6 rocks in this little bath that I've created. It wasn't on any of the rocks. It was in the water, frantically doing its legs and arms, and it was just, really panicking. I could feel its energy of panicking. So I got a stick and I said, come on, up you get. And I put it back onto a rock, and I was like, if you climb down on the rock gently, you'll be able to get a drink. You don't need to go in the water. So it was like, oh, right, okay. So I turned round, I carried on with what I was doing, and I just happened to glance back. And as I glanced back, this wasp is doing the same thing again. It's in the water, it's panicking. I'm like, what are you doing? It's like, oh, I stepped off again. And I could just feel this energy of like this wasp was just, it had got itself into such a panic mode from the first time it happened. It was almost like now nothing made sense. It just couldn't process what it was supposed to be doing. It had panicked itself so much, and it was like how we would feel, if adrenaline takes over. You have some people that adrenaline takes over and they're excellent in a crisis. and it fuels them. And then you have other people who adrenaline takes over and they just turn to jelly and they can't do anything. And this was the situation with this wasp. And I was like, I'm not doing this again, because I need to move to another area of the garden, and I can bet my life it's going to do the same thing. So I picked it up for a second time and I said to it, don't go near the water. Come over here, dry yourself off. And I popped it into one of the flowers on my balloon plant on the other side of the garden. And it was sat there and it was like, like if you've had a shock, I could feel it was just this, while it was trying to calm itself down, and it began grooming itself, and it was resting, and it was trying to dry off. And it was like, thank you, I don't know what happened. And I was like, you just need to observe, like the other wasp had been telling me, we need to observe them. I was like, you just need to observe your surroundings. And at the time I didn't really think of it, but looking back, I actually feel that this was perhaps quite a young wasp that was just getting used to the world, and so it was kind of navigating its way. But yeah, I mean, they're funny stories, and I share them because they're teachable moments from the animal kingdom, but also because it makes us realize that animals go through different things. They go through things that scare them, they go through things where they learn, they go through making mistakes. All of the things that we experience, they experience too, to some degree, on a different level. But I really enjoyed this communication with the wasp, because it just made me feel that, yeah, we shouldn't be afraid of anything. As long as we're respectful and we're living in harmony and we're aware, we don't have to be afraid. Living in fear is such a low vibrational energy, and sadly, in the world that we live in, we've been conditioned to be afraid of nearly everything, and even afraid of ourselves. But something that the animal kingdom always teaches me, and being in nature, is just to realize how connected we all are, and to realize that we all bring something to the earth, but we all bring something to each other. And often, especially with the flowers, you walk along and you some people don't even notice it. I'm always, ever since I was a child, I've loved flowers and nature and just seeing and observing everything. And I will forever be amazed. I'll have friends and I'll be like, oh wow, look at that rainbow. And they're like, well, it's just a rainbow, we see a lot of them. And I'm like, every rainbow is a magical gift. Like, I will always have that amazing wonder of everything upon the earth, because it is a miracle. It's wonderful. And, we might notice the flowers, but they wouldn't be here if it wasn't for these insects. The reason that we have an abundance is because of the insects. And so I would just say as well, to think about that and the importance of them before you reach for, the wasp spray, the ant spray, fly spray, the sticky traps for flies, all of the things. And, it's the same with other things that we think of as pests. Like, if you haven't watched my other video about rats and the channeling I did with rats, it was so eye-opening and really quite sad about the way that we treat rats and the way that we view them. Again, another creature that's been demonized by us. I highly recommend you go and watch it, because that was a real emotional connection for me with rats, and I view them completely differently. They've given me so much understanding. But it is just to bring forward that awareness of, being more mindful of the world that we live in, and to realize that this isn't our world. We are a part of this world. We all have a right to be here. We all deserve to live a happy life. And hopefully through my work, I will bring not only joy from the animal kingdom and from nature, because they have wonderful senses of humor, and just the wonderful wisdom that they share is so joyful and loving. But I also hope that I bring through more understanding, so that if you have had fears and phobias, or you've been unsure about certain things, that you can perhaps gain a little bit of insight into the true nature of these creatures. I really hope you found that enjoyable today. As I said, have a look at my video about understanding rats, the channeling that I did with them. I think it's really beneficial for all people to listen to. If you have liked my content today, please do like, comment, share and subscribe. If you are interested in the more human side of things and my spiritual mediumship, please do head over to my other YouTube channel, which is Enlightened by Spirit, Spirit Journey of Enlightenment, which is the same for my Instagram. And I'll leave that with you today with lots of love from the Wasp Kingdom and from myself. And I will speak to you again soon. Thank you for listening.